Welcome back, everybody. It's Bruce from the Epic Experiment Podcast, back with another deck tech. So, this is something a little different for you here. This is a budget version of this girl, Tocasia Dig Site Mentor. So she's banned. So 1 white, blue, green for a 4/3 human artificer legendary creature. Creatures you control have vigilance and get tap, surveil 1. And then 2 green, green, white, white, blue, blue. Exile Tocasia Dig Site Mentor from your graveyard. Return any number of target artifact cards with total mana value 10 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. I happen to like her because I've had a lot of success with her in Brawl. But one of the things that I like about her, there's 2 different ways to build her. The first way is you play into that artifact theme. And if you want to fill your graveyard with artifacts and then cash her in to get them all back, which is one cool option. Or you can go the option the way I have gone in this instance, where I'm going to lean into the ability to make things tap and to surveil. So to that end, I was looking at Duskmourn, and Duskmourn cards had a really interesting ability. So Kona is a great example of this. It has survival. So 3/0 green for a 4/3 legendary creature beast survivor with survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Kona Rescue Beastie is tapped, you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. Well, that clause where things are in their second main phase and if they're tapped is actually a little tricky to make work, because lots of times that means you have to put your creature into attacking mode. Well, in this deck, Tocasia allows you to tap your creatures without having to necessarily put them into combat. So we have things like Cautious Survivor that says if it's tapped in your second main phase, you gain 2 life. Very handy. We have Twitching Doll. This one just makes you tap it to make mana, and then you can go and put a whole bunch of counters on it. If you sacrifice it, then you get a whole bunch of 2/2 green spiders. Unctus. Unctus makes you tap your creatures so you can turn them into blue artifact creatures, and then they can tap to loot, which is super useful too. It also says other artifact creatures you control get +1/+0. Handy but less useful. House Cartographer is another card with survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if House Cartographer is tapped, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a land card. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. All right, sounds good to me. Savior of the Small. 3 white for a 3/4 with survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Savior of the Small is tapped, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to your hand. So it's kind of like a mini Sun Titan effect. We have Fallow Sage. Whenever Fallow Sage becomes tapped, you may draw a card. This is excellent with Tocasia because you can tap it to surveil, and then you can use the ability to stack the trigger such that you then draw the card you've just surveilled, so you can control the top of your deck. Super handy. Rip Spawn Hunter, 2 white green for a 4/4 legendary creature human survivor. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Rip Spawn Hunter is tapped, reveal at the top X cards of your library, where X is its power. Put any number of creatures and or vehicle cards with different powers from among them into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library. Okay, kind of handy. Could be a good way to refill your hand. Shorekai Genesis Engine. This one is an excellent artifact. So 2 white blue for an 8/8. Legendary artifact vehicle. 1 tap, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. Create a 1/1 colorless pilot token. With this creature, cruise vehicles as though they had his power were 2 greater, and has crew 8. And then it could be your commander, but it isn't. Well, we have Wily Duke. This is from Outlaws of Thunder Junction it's a 4/2 with vigilance for 1 a white and a green. And it says whenever Wily Duke Atten Hero becomes tapped, you gain 1 life and you draw a card. Seems good with our dear friend Tocasia again. Sereth, the Viper's Fang. So 2 green, green for a 3/4. Other top creatures you control have Death Touch. Handy, so if you decide you're going to start attacking with things your opponent may not want to block because they have Death Touch, making it really unpleasant to block. Other untapped creatures you control have Hexproof. That sounds good to me. And then 1 and untap another target creature or land you control. All right, sounds good. Order of White Clay. This is a 1 white white for a 1/4, and then 1 white white and untap it. Return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is a mechanic. The untap mechanic was in Lore 1 block. And so now that I can get it tapped with Tocasia, I can then use the ability to untap it to Sun Titan something back into play, which seems good. We have Amara, Soul of the Accord, a white and a green for a 2/2. Whenever Amara, Soul of the Accord becomes tapped, create a 1/1 white soldier token with lifelink. And last but not least, we have Reluctant Role Model, 1 and a white for a 2/2 with survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if Reluctant Role Model is tapped, put a flying, lifelink, or +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever Reluctant Role Model or another creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, put those counters on up to 1 target creature. So those are the cards that play really, really well with Tocasia and lean into that surveil mechanic. And those are what you really want to make use of. Now, to get those creatures into play, you're obviously going to need some ramp. All right, so we're going to get some ramp. We're going to have 3 visits. We'll have a Nature's Lore, a Farseek, and a Sylvan Scrying. I play almost exclusively 2-mana ramp spells in green when I play because I am tired of having my things blown up by Vandal Blasts or by having my artifacts wrecked by things that turn them off. So, no thank you. There we go. We've also got in here, we've got a Fabro Elder, which is a pretty handy creature because it gets +1/+1 for each color among permanents you control. In this deck, that would mean it's usually a 3/3, and it can tap for each color among permanents you control, add 1 mana of that color. All right, we've got the good old Sol Ring. The last 2 are really, really interesting. So the first one is Open the Way. Green, X for a sorcery. X can't be greater than the number of players in the game. Reveal cards at the top of your library until you reveal X land cards. Put those land cards onto the battlefield tapped and the rest on the bottom of your library. So you could get up to 3 lands, put them into play. And last but not least, we have Harvest Season. So 2 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control, and put those cards onto the battlefield tapped. Since Tocasia is encouraging you to tap your things, Harvest Season could net you a whole bunch of land. All right, now let's talk about how other ways I can get my things tapped. Let's imagine that my opponents remove my Tocasia. How am I going to make sure that creatures I do have into play can be tapped? So I've got a couple of things. First off, we've got some ways to tap them. We've got Enduring Vitality. So the key ability here is that creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. So you can tap your survival creatures for mana, and then you can get the trigger when they're in a second main phase. Cryptolith Rite says the same thing. Creatures you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color. And then last but not least, we have Dazzling Theater. So this is Dazzling Theater prop room is a room from Duskmourn that says creature spells you control have Convoke. So you can convoke, tap your creatures to help pay the costs of things, particularly other creatures in particular. So your survival creatures can be used to help cast other things. All right, very good, useful things. Now let's talk about how we untap our things to get more value out of them. So Merc Fiend Liege, 2 hybrid Simic for a 4/4. Other green creatures you control get +1/+1. Other blue creatures you control get +1/+1. Untap all green and or blue creatures you control during each other player's untap step. That constitutes most of the creatures in the deck. We have a Quest for Renewal. This is an old one from Zendikar. 1 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control becomes tapped, you may put a quest counter on Quests for Renewal. As long as there are 4 or more quest counters on Quest for Renewal, untap all creatures you control during each other player's untap step. So this is going to be guaranteed. You're going to get the quest counters on it real quick because you're surveilling or you're tapping your things with your Cryptolith Rite effects, and then you're going to get some good value. The other 2 don't need a whole lot of explanation. Seedborn Muse and Drumbellower might be 2 of the best cards in the deck. So Seedborn Muse says untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. So that means all your lands and your creatures. And then 2 and a white for Drumbellower. It's a 2/1 with flying. Untap all creatures you control during each other player's untap step. Super good. Untaps all those survival things. All right. Now, beyond here, we're going to have some other things. We're going to have some recursion. All right. Because we're surveilling, we're going to be putting things into our graveyard. So we're going to put lands in. Well, we want those back. So we have Splendid Reclamation. Splendid Reclamation gets our lands back. Hedge Shredder, which is a vehicle from Duskmourn. 2 green for a 5/5 vehicle. Whenever Hedge Shredder attacks, you may mill 2 cards. Whenever 1 or more land cards are put into your graveyard from your library, put them onto the battlefield tapped. So that is going to be super useful so you can get your lands back after you surveilled them away with your Tocasia. Now, you're going to invariably surveil some other things in your graveyard. So Sevinne's Reclamation is super handy. 2 and a white for a sorcery. Return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, you may copy this spell and you may choose a new target for the copy. And with flashback for 4 and a white. So this is a good way to get all sorts of cool things back to the battlefield. Sun Titan, this is a classic, doesn't need much of an explanation here. 4 white for a 6/6 with vigilance, and whenever Sun Titan enters or attacks, you may return target permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. That one's a classic one. Cosmic Rebirth, 1 white-green, choose target permanent card in your in your graveyard. If it has mana value 3 or less, you may put it onto the battlefield. If you don't, put it onto the battlefield, put it into your hand, and you gain 3 life. And last but not least, we have Sarah Paragon, 2 white for a 3/4 flying angel. Once during each of your turns, you may play a land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. If you do, it gains when this permanent is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, exile it, and you gain 2 life. All right, so all those ways are going to get your things back from the graveyard, making sure that you don't run out of gas. All right, then we've got some big payoffs for all that mana we're making with our Cryptolith Rites effects and surveilling things. We're going to have a Dawn of Hope, which has a mode on it for 3 and a white, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. So you're going to be able to use that mana to flood out the board and make lots of tokens. It says whenever you gain life, you may pay 2. If you do, you may draw a card. And then we have Biogenic Ooze, 3 green for a 2/2 ooze. When Biogenic Ooze enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 green ooze creature token. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each ooze you control. And then 1 green, create a 2/2 green ooze creature token. All right. Next you know, we've got some value cards that are just super good. So Yasharn is a pretty good stacks piece. They can't sack things. But it also tutors up a basic forest and a basic plains card, so it plays double duty there very effectively. We have Keeper of the Accord, which is a catch-up mechanic. So at the beginning of your opponent's end step, if that player controls more creatures than you, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. And at the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more lands than you may search your library for a basic plains, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Very handy. Sigarda, Font of Blessings, has just too much text on it for it to not be good. 2 white-green for a 4/4 flying angel. Other permanents you control have hexproof. You may look at the top card of your library. You may cast angel spells and human spells from the top of your library. Okay. We've got a Metropolis Reformer giving you hexproof. It's a 2/3 for 1 and a 3. 2 and a white. And it is super useful. We've got Insidious Fungus. This is a great way to destroy artifacts and enchantments, but sometimes you just need to cash it in for a card. Able to do so. Shalai gives your things hexproof, and then you can, with another mana sink, once you have a board state, you can start putting counters on your creatures and really making your things hard to block. Aurelia's Vindicator. This is one I'm not convinced. I'm sure I'm going to play it, but it can be handy. So this is a 2 white angel it's a 4/2 with flying, lifelink, and ward. It also is disguised for X, 3, and a white. When Aurelia's Vindicator is turned face up, exile it up to X other target creatures from the battlefield and or creature cards from graveyards. When Aurelia's Vindicator leaves the battlefield, return the exiled cards to their owner's hands. So you could use that as a way to recur your things from your graveyard after you surveilled them, or you could use them perhaps aggressively to remove troublesome things on your opponent's side. Loran is your Reclamation Sage, but on white, and it can tap it to draw a card. Very useful card. I think is one of my favorite staples. Aftermath Analyst. This is similar to Splendid Reclamation. You can use this to, after you surveilled a couple of lands away, you can use it to get them back. Then we've got Tomb of Horrors Adventures. I've been fascinated by this card for a while because of the initiative mechanic. So 5 and a blue for a 4/4 elf monk. When Tomb of Horrors Adventure enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, copy it. not instant or sorcery, any of your second spell. So you could be getting extra creatures out of this. If you've completed a dungeon, copy that spell twice instead you may choose new targets for the copies. That is appealing, so I want to see if I can make that work. And Tranquil Frillback is just a really useful value creature where it enters the battlefield and you can pay green to destroy target artifact or enchantment, exile target player's graveyard, or you can gain 4 life. All right, the rest of what we have is just some card draw and some board control. So we've got things like Fact or Fiction, Lunar Insight, Biden of Thassa, Deep Analysis. We've got Treasure Cruise, which is handy, and Return of the Wild Speaker. Those are just straight up instants or sorceries that draw cards. I guess Biden is an enchantment. All right, we also have a Kiora of the Rising Tide and Dowerport Mage. So Kiora plays into the graveyard synergy. Whenever Kiora enters, draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. So you're going to fuel your graveyard so she can hit Threshold. So whenever Kiora attacks, if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you may create a Scion of the Deep, a legendary 8/8 blue octopus token. Or the Dowerport Mage is 1 and a blue for a 1/3. Whenever 1 or more other creatures you control leave the battlefield without dying, draw a card. And then 1 and a blue, tap, return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. So you can use that to return your things to your hand and be able to re-trigger things, which is super handy. The interaction is very simple. All right, so it's pretty simple. We've got an offer you can't refuse and a wash away, really as the only ways to get to counter things. I like to keep my counter spells cheap, and I don't like to play too many of them in many decks because it makes people really unhappy. Time Wipe is a board wipe that allows me to return something to my hand, so it doesn't get a complete blowout. Broker's Charm is a flexible instant or sorcery spell that has a bunch of different modes on it, including destroy target enchantment or maybe draw 2 cards. Split Up is the real one that you want to be playing in this deck because you can set it up such that you benefit from it and your opponents do not. So 1 white for a sorcery. Choose 1. Destroy all tapped creatures or destroy all untapped creatures. Well, thanks to our dear friend Tocasia, you can tap all your creatures and then cast this as a one-sided board wipe, and your opponents are going to be very upset. The last one we have here is we have a win condition here. We have an Approach of the Second Sun. So this one I put in this deck, and I put it as a failsafe in lots of decks. Because with the Surveil, once you've cast this, it goes 7th from the top. You can Surveil away the extra cards to get to it more rapidly, put it back in your hand, and allowing you to cast it a second time more expediently in order to secure your win. All right. Altogether, this deck is about $210. All right. So fairly budget friendly. You can obviously spend a lot more money on the mana base. If you would want, you can buy shocks and fetches and all the other good toys. But at its base, it is a $200 deck thereabouts, and you can get a lot of bang for your buck. So next time you're riffling through your boxes of stuff and you come across a Tocasia, do not assume that she's no darn good and that she could be up to some lots of fun in your next Commander game. If you want to see the list, it's down below in the show notes, or you can check out all of our episodes for the show each and every week on your favorite podcast app. Once again, that's Bruce with the Epic Experiment Podcast, wishing you all a good night. Thanks very much, and have a great one. Talk to you later.